Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is Will Folkerts with Refuge at the First United Methodist Church in Sheraton. I hope this finds you well and that you have had a great week, regardless of the cool, rainy weather that we've been experiencing. Interesting story that I want to start with today, and it has to do with my garden. I've been talking about my garden a lot, but it's kind of that time of year. So, gardening, as I have said in previous videos, is an important outlet for me right now. It's relaxing and completely satisfying to watch my plants grow every single day. It's a great stress reliever for me. And gardening is not easy. It's a lot of hard work too. It's important to get out there every day to weed the invasive plants that you don't want taking up space and precious water from your important plants. One type of plant that I love to grow, and I do this every year, are herbs. I grow them for fresh flavor, um, fresh flavor punches in my cooking during the summer. I love to cook and I love to use things that I grow in my cooking. And I also like to dry them too. I have a dehydrator and I like to dry them and save them for later use during the winter months to also increase that flavor. One herb that I planted last year was peppermint. Sounds like a great idea. And I bought three of these plants. They started off very small, and I put them in a small area in my backyard that I had kind of cultivated and tilled to be kind of a little herb garden. Now, here's a little disclaimer for those of you who have never planted peppermint before, and you might want to know this for future use. They grow incredibly fast and they spread everywhere. It did not take long for my little tiny peppermint plants to begin to invade their surrounding areas, pushing out some of my other plants. It was kind of a shock and a little irritating. I tried to manage the invasion for as long as I could, but it was a losing battle. I simply just could not keep up with how fast the peppermint spread. It really should say on the little tag before you buy it, say, buy one, it spreads everywhere. But it didn't. But it's a learning experience. It's kind of the fun part with gardening. So I made the decision earlier this week. I wouldn't say out of rage, but kind of just out of irritation, to completely remove the peppermint plants entirely and repurpose that area with a less invasive species. So I got to work. I started to remove the stems and leaves from the top, and that was pretty easy. Starting to make a little pile, and that was that was actually the extent of the easy. As I started to work on the roots, I began to sweat. And here's another interesting fact that I learned about peppermint: they are invasive because of their roots. Uh, the root the roots spread out from the base plant. And the interesting thing is, so like I'm a biology major, I love learning about plants and stuff. The interesting thing was that the reason why it spread so well is that as the roots spread out, the roots would actually send up new stems and leaves in every direction. And peppermint thrives because of this deep root system. My three little herb plants turned into a giant mound of roots. And I had to dig these things out for a long time. And I guarantee you I didn't get them all. I came to the conclusion that I just couldn't. I would dig a little deeper and find an entirely new layer of these thick roots. And I was kind of lucky that it had rained previously, because if the ground was hard, I probably would have gotten a lot less than what I did. And I am fully expecting to be pulling out new shoots of peppermint for the next year or so, as that's how massive this root system was. So there's a purpose to this story. Here's my question to you: how can we use this idea of deep roots in our faith and journey with Jesus? So kind of turning this into kind of an aha moment. Why is establishing a deep root system important as we grow closer to God? Those are two great questions. And I was kind of thinking about that. It's kind of weird when I come up with these lessons. I was kind of thinking about that as I was sweating and completely covered in dirt and mud digging out this peppermint. I was like, oh, this is an interesting idea. And so let's think about the purpose of a plant's root system to help us find these answers. Like I said, biology major here, so I like to think about this scientifically here, but let's see how far this can take us. I had three ideas. So let's start with, why does a plant have roots? Okay, maybe you think back to that elementary lesson when you were given like the green bean seed or the sunflower seed, and you got to kind of germinate it and put some water on it and watch the roots start to come out. But here's a couple of reasons. Number one, plants have roots, and this is the obvious one. Plants have roots to gather nutrients and water from the ground. Okay, the root is the very first thing to sprout from a seed. And if this seed represents the beginning or infancy of our faith with Jesus, it's important to send our roots in his direction. Okay? You'll never see a plant send their roots away from a water source. They'll always be drawn to it. Okay? And so with this, a source of nutrients and water that will never fail or dry out, that's Jesus. And so we got to send our roots towards him. Okay? Many times the Bible talks about living water, or a cup that overflows, or the idea of like never thirsting again. And that's because a life with Jesus is like a life with the ultimate gardener. Think about that. Jeremiah 17:7-8 says, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water, that sends out its roots by the stream." And the stream is Jesus. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought, and never fails to bear fruit. So think about that with reason number one is the roots are used to get that water. And if we think of Jesus as that water, let's have our roots dig towards him. All right, number two. Roots grow deep within the soil, anchoring the plant to the ground, giving it much strength. What happens to a plant whose root system is shallow, or has not established itself well enough into the ground, and a great wind or flood comes? Okay? We live in Iowa, and so it's not uncommon to have 30, 40 mile an hour wind. Okay? Or like with this previous week, we got about 2 to 3 inches of rain within an hour, and that can create this flooding effect. So what happens to this plant who doesn't have that established root system? The entire plant is either uprooted or blows away because the shallow water, or that shallow soil, erodes, and it either gets blown away or it gets washed away. That's interesting. A deep root system is crucial for our faith in Jesus to be strong. Never be complacent with your faith's roots. Don't be like, oh, I've done enough. My relationship with Jesus is, we're cool. We don't need to do much more than what we're doing. Never be complacent. Never stop digging your roots closer and closer to God. This is because life is not always going to be that sunny day. Storms will come that will threaten to uproot you entirely if you are not deep with Christ. Mark 4:15-20 says, "The seed that fell on the footpath represents those who hear the message, only to have Satan come at once and take it away. The seed on the rocky soil represents those who hear the message and immediately receive it with joy. But since they don't have deep roots, they don't last long. They fall away as soon as they have problems or are persecuted for believing in God's words. The seed that fell among the thorns represents others who hear God's words, but all too quickly the message is crowded out by the worries of this life, the lure of wealth, and the desire of other things, so no fruit is produced. And the seed that fell on the good soil represents those who hear and accept God's words and produce a harvest of 30, 60, or even 100 times as much has been planted." And lastly, the thought that I want to leave you with today is, let's think about number three. Number three, just like a peppermint plant, so this goes back to my story, roots can be used to start again or spread to new and previously untouched areas. So that frustration I felt with this peppermint, let's turn this into a God moment here. Starting again is something that even Christians have to do sometimes. Okay? You can never fully prepare for it. But events in this life can completely catch you off guard and turn your whole world upside down. Another plant reference, prairie plants. So let's think about Iowa 200 years ago. Okay? Prairie plants, which can be found still in some places in southern Iowa, but most of the prairie is gone now. But Iowa used to be completely covered in it. And prairie plants, such as like big blue stem or like switchgrass, they have extreme root systems. Super deep and super wide. They reach out in all directions. And that's because prairie, it can be dry, it can be wet. There's a lot of things that go along with it. But another reason why is there's an intense event that can happen with these prairies. And it used to happen all the time. And it would happen because of prairie fires. And prairie fires either started, a couple of reasons, either by the Native Americans trying to attract buffalo, or lightning would burn intensely hot and intensely fast as it started these fires. And the reason why it would burn so quickly is because prairie was very dense. There's a lot of dead plant matter close to the ground, and it was pretty much a giant fuel source. And it would burn intensely hot, and everything above the ground would be destroyed. It would turn to ash. But the roots would survive. They would be just fine. And as the fire faded, the roots would quickly send up new sprouted grass, greener and stronger than ever before. And so then that's like the Native Americans would do that because the buffalo would then come and eat the grass. But that's just an interesting fact. And I'm not under the assumption that life is supposed to be easy. Rooting our faith and our life in Jesus saves us when everything else seems to burn away. It can not only save us, but it can save others. And last week I said that God uses people to save other people. And an established, well-rooted faith can be used to send God's love in every direction. Your roots can be the conversation starter that brings Jesus to someone else's life for the very first time. Let your roots run deep and never stop seeking Him. You may never fully realize how far your roots may reach in their impact on other people. Have a great week.